Welcome to this episode of Relatively Famous, the podcast where I, Chip White, interview relatives of famous people. Now, my famous relative is Vanna White of Wheel of Fortune. She's my sister, hence the podcast where I talk to other relatives to find out what their life is like and how we kind of compare. Today's guest, I'm super excited, is the niece of Robert Mitchum, the actor. Now, the crazy thing is, last night I was on Prime trying to watch something, and in my suggestion box, 5 Robert Mitchum movies actually popped in there. So I guess that the world is listening. I'm super excited to have Cindy on today, Cindy Mitchum Azbill. And before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor, our underwriter, which is visitmyrtlebeach.com. That's visitmyrtlebeach.com. Now, I'm from the Myrtle Beach area. I love my hometown area. I love the fact that there's, 60 miles of beautiful beach, 90 golf courses, 2,000 restaurants. There's just so much fun things to do, family oriented, and just go do a boys golf trip or something. You can plan it all by going to visitmyrtlebeach.com. And with that, I want to welcome our guest today, Cindy Mitchum Azbill.
Relatively Famous podcast with Chip White.
Cindy, welcome to Relatively Famous.
Well, thank you for having me here.
I think another podcaster connected us, if I remember this correctly, and I've always been a fan of your uncles, and I urge our viewers that don't know who Robert Mitchum is to go Google him. He was in the original Cape Fear, tons of westerns with John Wayne and Dean Martin, and just amazing actor. And your father was also in the business with him also, correct?
Correct. Dad actually did a lot more westerns than Uncle Bob did.
Tell me a little bit about your dad real quick, because obviously...
He was a character actor, so he did over 800 TV episodes. So he was more of a chameleon. Uncle Bob was well known for being Uncle Bob, but Dad was... every Western you can imagine. I have people constantly having fun on Facebook telling me, I just saw your dad in Batman, or I just saw him in Have Gun Will Travel, or I just saw him in whatever. He's most recognized as Clint Eastwood's partner, DiGiorgio, in the 3 Dirty Harry pictures. But he actually did 6 films with Clint. See, a light bulb went off.
What was that?
I said I could see that you didn't put that connection until I said it.
No, I didn't actually, and we talked about this before. It's like I don't do a lot of research. I just because I want to have this, more conversations about who the people are and what their life is like. So, your uncle's famous. Your dad is in more films than basically your uncle. What is probably the most memorable day in the life in your Hollywood life? Does that make sense? I mean, I've had some crazy things happen because of my sister, and I mean, I'm on the outskirts. I'm the brother. You're the niece and the daughter right there in it. What's been the quintessential Hollywood day for you?
Oh, that's a tough one. My dad was also nominated for a Grammy for writing the only album John Wayne ever recorded. It was called America, Why I Love Her. And the year that it came out, it sold over 100,000 copies the first weekend it was out. And they have created fireworks display routines to go with the title poem. And we were invited down to Dodger Stadium, and they did fireworks displays with America, Why I Love Her. That was pretty good.
Now, I think a lot of people don't even realize that John Wayne did an album. I do remember it, and I have heard it during July 4th celebrations. Did he do other music? Did your dad do other music, or was this kind
absolutely.
of his thing?
Dad was actually trained as a singer, and what to me is one of his highlights was he did an album with Dan Blocker, Haas, a Virginian, called Our Land, Our Heritage. And Dad researched, he was a history buff, and he researched why these folk songs were written, what was going on in that region, what was going on in the country, what was going on in the world that created these songs, and why did they stay while other songs disappeared. So he wrote the narration. Dan Blocker did the narration. Dan couldn't sing at all. Dad sang with the Ken Darby Choir behind him. And it's a magnificent, magnificent album. And from that, Dad actually wrote a series called Songs of History, which is taking that thought and expanding it into a whole series, which we are now producing.
Yeah, we'll talk a little about that in just a second because I want to know more about what you do. The only Dan Blocker story I know, other than trying to have his son on the show, which we haven't been successful yet, was when we were kids, and I was probably 5, Dan Blocker flew into Little North Myrtle Beach Airport for a personal appearance, and Mom said, go stand by him by the plane and get your picture taken. I was terrified and started crying. There's actually a picture of Vanna as a little girl standing by Dan Blocker, a little black and white photo.
Dan was huge. He was huge and intimidating. He was the only guy bigger than my dad.
Oh, wow. Now, we'll get back to the family part soon, but tell me a little bit about your life and what you've been doing last how many years?
Well, Dad wrote a book called Them Honorary Mitchum Boys, which is not your typical Hollywood kiss and tell by any means. He was adamant that there was no reason to say anything that would be hurtful to anybody while they were still alive. There were plenty of good stories to go around. You didn't need to say anything cruel. But it was also, it's not a dry autobiography of on March 17th, I was walking down the street. It's like he's having a conversation with you, and he goes from one story to another. But it's been called a love story between the two brothers because my biological grandfather was tragically killed in a train accident when my grandmother was pregnant with my dad. So he never got to meet him. Bob was 2, and their older sister, Julie, was 5. And so Bob took it upon himself to be Dad's protector. And they were extremely close. And they got into a lot of trouble as kids. They were too active-minded, shall we say, and adventuresome. For example, Dad was 5 years old and was in a little field and thought he was on an African safari. And he was baking a potato, and I don't know why a 5-year-old had matches, but he set a fire and it caught the ice cream shop that was next door on fire. And he blamed Uncle Bob for it. But Uncle Bob luckily had an airtight alibi that he was across town. And so they never came back and asked Dad any more questions.
That's interesting. Just throwing your brother under the bus.
Oh, they did it constantly. Dad was 14 and Uncle Bob was 16, and the Depression hit. And my Aunt Julie, who was a character unto herself, left home when she was 12 to join a vaudeville dance team. And she tap danced across the country and married a sailor when she was 15 and ended up in Long Beach. So when the Depression hit and they literally lost the family farm, my grandmother got in the car with her new husband and their baby, and they drove across the country, but there wasn't room for Dad and Uncle Bob. So they, like the Beverly Hillbillies, so Dad and Bob started hoboing, 14 and 16, across the country. My grandmother gave them each a clean handkerchief and a pair of socks and said, there you go, we'll see you in Long Beach. So that's, they rode the rails together. They were amazing.
I think stories like that are phenomenal. There's Waite and White Phillips from the Phillips Petroleum family. They left home at 16 or whatever, and they're twins, and they just go west. I love the fact that back then these kids were doing these amazing journeys that today, oh my God, man, parents would be locked up in prison for life.
No, I look at 14-year-olds now and just shake my head of what Dad and Bob did. I mean, Dad went across the country 4 times before he was 16.
Wow.
Yeah, it's well. That is what was the seed for America Why I Love Her, because he saw parts of this country that we've never seen, that we can only dream about seeing. And the poem itself is about the beauty of the country. Have you seen a Kansas sunset or an Arizona rain? It's not it's not political at all. It's not anything but the beauty of the country.
Now, I know you travel. Do you kind of look at the songs that your dad wrote and kind of retrace the trail, looking to see what he might have seen, to see if that beauty's still there? Does that make sense?
I have, and I would really like to delve into that. Um, my granddaughter has been sick for the last 5 years, and thank God she's stable now. She has a brain tumor. So that's kind of preoccupied us for the last 5 years. But now we're the all our grandkids are older. They're going to be 15. So it's time for us to be able to go off and do what we want to do a little bit too. But we also just reprinted Dad's book. So we're going to be doing a lot of fun with that.
Now, I know we talked to, I want to get back to the travel part in a second, but we did talk about a little bit the connection. It seems like everybody has a Vanna story that I come across. And you were telling me that you actually have a Vanna story regarding your granddaughter.
I certainly do. I certainly do. My cousin Carrie Mitchum, who was a lifesaver. The long story short was, during COVID, my granddaughter was 9 years old, and she suddenly started having these massive headaches. And the pediatrician said, "Oh, it's because of all the Zoom and the going back and forth of not being in school, being in school." And I said, "No, it's more than that." And I took her to my eye doctor, and when she did the little flashlight test, her face fell, and I knew something was wrong. She immediately had an MRI, and because she thought she had a tumor on her optic nerve, which she didn't, thank God. But they sent her down to UC Davis for more extensive tests, and within 2 weeks, we were having massive brain surgery. And we were just like stunned. And Carrie took care of everything for me. She got an Airbnb so that we could stay there, and did all the stuff that I just couldn't even fathom. But she also was friends with Vanna's producer and let him know, and he let Vanna know. And while my granddaughter was in ICU, again, she's 9 years old and a twin, these two enormous boxes show up. And Clementine opens them up, and they were from Vanna with all kinds of swag from the show. But Vanna actually had them put up "Get Well Clemmy" on her board, and it was shown on air. But Vanna took a picture of herself pointing at the board like she always does, but with "Get Well Clemmy," signed it and framed it and sent it to Clementine, which she has up in her room.
That's so cool. I love stories like that. I mean, she's super generous and giving in that aspect of life.
Oh, well, Clementine couldn't believe it. I mean, she was just blown away, and she was, for a long, long time, she wouldn't say she had cancer. She had a tumor. She didn't want to be the sick kid, which was fine. But she sure bragged about the picture with Vanna.
I love that. Now, re-releasing the book, I think you're looking to produce some films based on it also, or documentary.
We're turning the book. The book is going to be a limited series. There's so many stories in there that it could not be a feature film. It would be honed into one story, probably about Uncle Bob, focusing and probably going about the 1948 pot bust, which there's so much more to him than that. And it's going to be exemplifying the strength of the women in their family. They were raised by their mother. Their Norwegian grandmother had a great influence on them. They lived with her. This little tiny Norwegian woman. Their Norwegian grandfather was a sea captain and was massive like Dad was. But grandmother Patrine was tiny and petite, but very stern and in a loving way, and guided both of them. And they both really influenced their creativity. In Norway, poetry writing for men is common. So singing and poetry and things like that were well established in the home, and being well read was very, very important to my grandmother. So, but like going up, the people that they met riding the rails, or of course, there's Hollywood stories. I mean, look at the lineup of ladies that Uncle Bob had: Marilyn Monroe, Jane Russell, Jane Greer. How could you not? Loretta Young. That's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, he had quite a run in life there. Now,
He said he was a victim of circumstance.
I'm going to start using that. Yes, I'm a victim of circumstance, honey. The in your life when you were younger, or did you ever want to pursue the movie business, be in front of the camera? What propelled you through your younger days into where you are today?
When I was younger, my dad's agent and other people wanted me to go into the business. I had every opportunity to, but I was an odd child in the sense that I already understood how much a production cost, and I didn't want to be the one to flub my line so many times and be responsible for blowing that much money. I really honestly didn't. And I didn't want the responsibility of having to learn lines and especially accents, because Dad and Bob were they could pick up an accent within 2 minutes. Seriously, they had to. They learned to do that when they were riding the rails, because they would get picked up for vagrancy if they didn't have the dialect of the town that they were in. So they picked up that ability. So that was the benchmark that I saw of that ability. And I knew I didn't have it. So I just didn't even consider trying to try.
Now, as a child, you're in the depths of Hollywood. What's your most memorable Christmas from that period?
Oh, well, a true funny story is Dad played Santa Claus a lot, and because he had the big stomach and he had a 22-inch neck, and he always wore a beard. And the reason for that was when he did Riverboat with Burt Reynolds, he didn't have a beard, and they gave him a false mustache, and he found out that he's allergic to spirit gum. So he always had a beard. It was easier to shave a beard for a part than grow one or put on a beard. So he always had a beard. So he did Santa a lot, and he was Santa in the Hollywood parade. And I had this odd memory, and I finally asked Dad before he died. I said, why do I have this weird memory of being up on some sort of float with a guy in a uniform? And he kind of looked at me and said, I hoped you would not remember that. And I said, what was it? And Dad, we were at the Hollywood parade. My mom and my brother and I were going to be spectators. And obviously I was so little, I had no idea Dad was Santa Claus. So I didn't know where he went, which he always disappeared with his friends. So all of a sudden I was put on this float. I had a lazy eye. I looked like Jack Elam before my surgeries. And I'm on this float with this guy in a uniform. It was a Marine. I was on the Toys for Tot float. The disabled child that was scheduled to be there didn't show up. So they needed to have somebody to fill that spot. So Dad volunteered me because of my goofy eye, and he throws me up on the float. So, there.
That
was
funny.
pretty memorable in a weird way, but yeah.
Yeah.
And Dad always did a lot of charity work. So we were, again, as whether he was Santa Claus or whatever. So the most memorable story I have is Dad was dear friends with an actor named Natividad Vasio. Natty, if you look at him, he's done a gazillion things. But Dad asked Natty, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, so my neighborhood had 68 kids on our block of all religious walks of life. And Dad asked Natty, please find a family in East LA that is very much in need for Christmas, which he did. And Natty came and we did the nativity walk, the Posada. And we went house to house. All 68 of us kids went house to house asking for if we could stay, and no, but we would gather up goods. And then at the end, there's a celebration and a party. And Dad took us and some other kids from the neighborhood to this home. And it was literally a tar paper shack. And here we come bearing all these Christmas gifts for the children and Christmas dinner. And it was quite a startling experience. And one of my next door neighbor ended up being a specialist at Children's Hospital. And he said, Cindy, out of all my childhood experiences, that and seeing that condition is what spurred him on to be a specialist doctor helping children. So that was a pretty spectacular Christmas.
Wow. What profession did you choose since you didn't follow into the entertainment? What profession was your life? Does that make sense?
I started off modeling because I didn't have to learn lines. That was easy for me. And sadly, my mother passed away right before I graduated from high school. She died a month before my 18th birthday and a month before I graduated. And that kind of turned my world upside down. And I just kind of didn't have any direction at all. And I'd been going out with my husband for 3 years and we got married. I mean, I wanted to marry him. We're having our 50th wedding anniversary, so it wasn't a lark. But I got married and then we had our first baby, and I just kind of went that route and I wanted to be normal. I didn't know what that was. And years later, Dad looked at me and he said, when are you going to learn you're not normal? I didn't fit in the insurance world. But I said, Dad, I can't dance. I can't, Julie. I can't sing like you. I can't act. What am I supposed to do? He said, you'll figure it out. And I went, oh, that's great advice. Thanks a lot, Dad.
Sometimes you wish your parents would give you a little more advice. Like, my mom passed away just before I turned 20, and I went down some dark paths, and my dad at one point goes, well, I could have told you, but you were going to do it your way anyway. I'm like, yeah, but you could have given me a hand.
Yeah, you could have, exactly. Dad was like, you'll figure it out. So I figured it out. And he left me his legacy of songs of history, which we're doing. And because at this point in time, schools don't teach music, they don't teach geography, they don't teach social studies, they don't even teach history. So this series encompasses all of that. And in today's world, we can stream it and in 30-minute episodes, and combining all of those things together and putting a remarkable balladeer with a narrator, as well as having all of the actors behind it. It's a remarkable project. So that's what I'm doing.
Seeing it. I love little snippets, like good storytelling. Now, back to the stories and traveling. Is there somewhere between the two albums that you haven't been, that because of one of the songs you go, it's a must on this list, and in 2026 I am going to go to that spot? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm going to Charleston. That's where my grandfather was born, 40 miles out of Charleston in a little tiny town called Lane. And last year or year before, they actually put up a monument for Uncle Bob in Lane, South Carolina. But my grandparents were living in Charleston, and that's where my grandfather was killed. He was working in the train yard, and he was crushed between two trains. Um, and Uncle Bob would have been born there, but there was the pandemic. So my grandmother went up to Bridgeport, which is where the family was, and Bob was born at my great grandparents' house. And then after my grandfather passed away, my mom went back up to Bridgeport, and that's where my dad was born, in the same house. But I still have cousins that I've never met that are in Charleston. And one of the episodes for Songs of History is the battle hymn. So we have to go to Charleston and film at Fort Sumter, which I'm very excited about.
My son lives in Charleston. I used to close shop as a kid in Charleston because we were in Myrtle Beach, about 60 miles up the coast. And Charleston is phenomenal. Fort Sumter, I remember as in middle school, we did a trip to Fort Sumter, and then the Boy Scouts, we went to Fort Sumter. And it always amazes me that this was kind of the hub of the Civil War and the history in Charleston. So when you go, let me know. And my son would recommend you some amazing restaurants if your cousins and family don't.
That would be wonderful.
Know.
Wonderful.
He would. Yeah. He loves being a tour guide down there.
Well, I will definitely take you up on that, because I'm very much looking forward to that one.
Well, then you can just go up the coast and you can check out my hometown. There's also some amazing towns around Charleston. There's Beaufort and there's Hilton Head and of course Savannah a little further down. I love Beaufort, South Carolina.
I have a friend who's retired military, and he said you've got to go to Beaufort. Because with my history buff, I'm just going to love Beaufort.
It's phenomenal. Best film festival, Beaufort International Film Festival, my favorite.
I've been following it.
I love it. I love that place and that festival. It's like I can't talk enough about it. I know we're getting kind of pretty close to running out of time. We got a few more minutes. What is your kind of biggest or most memorable, because of your relationship, Hollywood moment? Like for me, I was at a New Year's Eve party at Rod Stewart's old house, and I got to meet Gene Kelly. And I've met tons of people, but I was like, dude, I'm here, and that's Gene Kelly, and I got to chat with him. What's that moment, because of your relationship, you have been in the heart of this really amazing Hollywood moment?
Funny that the most awestruck that I've ever been was musically. My husband was a synthesizer product specialist for a company called Oberheim, which is one of the first big synthesizer companies. And he got connected with David Palmer, who's now Dee Palmer of Jethro Tull. And we went backstage, and then we met afterward. And when I met Ian Anderson, that's when my world just sort of stood still. Same kind of thing with my mom. Uncle Bob took Dad and Mom to go see Satchmo, and Mom started crying when he kissed her hand. I told Jim Jury, who was the Virginian, who was one of my dad's dearest friends, I said, before he passed away, I said, Jim, I have a confession. I knew you were famous, but I didn't know how famous you were until recently. And he laughed and he said, that's because I'm just Uncle Jim to you. So Dad had a wide variety of friends, whether they were stuntmen or like, I never knew if I had John Wayne in my living room. So that really didn't faze me that much. They were just Dad's friends, and I like you, not doing research. When we were doing the tribute album that Ernest Borgnine told me I had to do, Ernest and A.C. Lyles, who was the oldest producer at Paramount, took me aside at the Golden Boot party and said, you have to do something special for your dad. And I said, what, a website? And they said, no, something more. They said, the country they need to hear your father's poetry. So Ernie said, all your dad's friends should be calling you and pick their favorite poem to record, and I'll be the first one to do it. So I suddenly, every time we thought we were done with it, somebody else would call me. There's 53 tracks on this CD of people ranging from Ernest Borgnine, Jane Russell, Robert Duvall, Jim Jury, L.Q. Jones, who was in every Western you can imagine, every Peck and Paw movie ever. People of that caliber were calling me to do this tribute to my dad. So it was pretty remarkable, the people that I've had in my life that I just love and adore and appreciate.
Well, and I love the fact to you, it's like they're just Uncle Jim. They're just so and so. It's like they're not. You're not sitting there going, oh, you're not, and you're not name dropping to the point of out of ego. They were just who your family hung out
like with
with.
LQ, he came in and he was doing a poem, and he starts talking about the Peck and Paw movies, and then he starts talking about Elvis movies, and he sang in 5 Elvis movies, which I had no idea. If I had done any research, I would have had him sing one of Dad's songs instead. But I didn't fathom LQ singing, but I was wrong.
Yeah,
But they were just, Dad loved everybody and everybody loved Dad. When he was doing the last Dirty Harry, when he got killed, one of the crew members came up to me and they said, Cindy, the world knows and loves your uncle, but the industry knows and loves your dad.
That's a great song. 'Cause I was about to ask you if there was like this kind of rivalry. Did the fact that your dad did more movies than your uncle bother him, and did the fact that your uncle became more
Uncle
famous?
Bob got paid more. There, when Andy Fenady, who was a very well respected and known producer and director, did a TV show that he wanted Uncle Bob to star in. So it ended up being called Jake Spanner. So he gave Dad the script because Dad had worked with him for years and years and years. And Dad gave it to Bob, and Bob told Dad, have Andy call me. So Uncle Bob agreed to do it on one term. And Andy was like, sure, whatever, Mr. Mitchum. And he said, I want my brother in it. So Andy actually gave this eulogy for Dad's memorial. He said, I did better. I wrote a part where they played brothers. It's the only time in history that they worked together. They did like 6 films together, but it's the only time that they actually played brothers in this film.
I think
And
that's cool.
Uncle Bob looked at Andy and said, thanks, pal. But Andy was laughing that Dad always had a twinkle in his eye. He was always the jokester. And he went up to Andy on set and said, so I'm just wondering, how is the credits going to go with this? And he said, well, alphabetically, John, and B for Bob comes before J for John. And Dad said, however, R for Mitchum, or R for Robert, is after J for John. And then Andy looked at him and said, it's by salary. And Dad said, no question, and walked away.
That's funny. I love the fact that they work together so much. I did a short movie years ago where I played the world's greatest chess player. It's called A Chess Player, and my dad actually plays my dad in it, and my son's in it, not in the same scenes, but there's 3 generations in that one movie, and I'll cherish that forever because it got to be on forever with my dad on film.
That's amazing. Uncle Bob did that with Chris and with his grandson Bentley. They did a thing. I think that was Promises to Keep. It was Uncle Bob and Christopher and Bentley Mitchum. So 3 generations there. That's pretty special. And when I was at Old Tucson, I was told that all 4 Mitchums have filmed at Old Tucson, which is kind of fun. And I'm going to be going to a beautiful place in Texas, in Blanco, Texas, called the Buggy Barn Museum, which kind of sounds like, what the heck is that? But it's a whole Western town, and they do have a whole museum of props and things there. But I found out that be doing a screening, a book signing for the book, and a screening of El Dorado. I'm just kind of making it a fun Mitchum day. And I found out that Bentley and Chris have both filmed at the Buggy Barn a lot. So that it's fun when that can happen.
That's very cool. If there's a parade within 100 miles of San Antonio and there's a wagon in it, it's got a Buggy Barn courtesy thing on it. That's okay. So
You know Buggy Barn?
I do. So we are
Well,
running out
you'll
of
have
time.
to come and join us. It's going to be Mother's Day weekend, I think.
Absolutely. We will put it on the calendar. So I'm running out of time. My last question. What is the question that I did not ask you or the question that no one ever asked you that you really wish would have been asked?
Oh, I think you kind of hinted on it of how the brothers felt about each other, but they were so close and they loved each other so much that they didn't even have to talk to one another. They could just make an eye motion to one another and they would know what the other one was thinking. And after Uncle Bob passed away, I went up to see Dad. He was living in Sonora. And we were talking, and all of a sudden, Dad started crying. And he said, I reached for the phone, and then I realized he's not there. That's how much they loved each other.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of people feel that way, unfortunately, when you lose a sibling or a relative, and it's sad. And I love the fact that you talk about how much they love each other.
Don't think they think that there's rivalry between the two. I think the closest comparison I can think of right now is Sly and Frank Stallone. You know, Sly is in his stardom, and Frank is well accomplished and well loved and respected for his abilities. But there's no resentment between the two of them. There's just sheer joy.
Yeah, and I've been trying to reach out to Frank to be on this show because years ago I knew Sly through some other avenues, and I was on a TV show with his sister. I think the Lisa Gibbons show with his sister years ago. I'm like, I'd love to have Frank on. So Frank, if you're listening, see, you just got high remarks.
Well, we'll just have to get him on there for you because the very first film that Sly did was Farewell, My Lovely with Uncle Bob.
Oh, wow. Okay. See, I learned something new. Cindy,
Yeah.
I am so grateful that you spent this time with us, and I hate to cut it short because I'm fascinated by what's going on, and I look forward to seeing you here in Texas. And again, thank you for your time today.
Well, you're more than welcome. I'll definitely see you at the Buggy Barn then. I'm counting on it.
Okay. Now that was a lot of fun. I learned a whole lot of information, and now I'm going to have to go back and watch one of those 5 films that popped up on my Prime. Cindy, thank you so much for being on the show. I want to thank you, the viewer, the listener. Without you, I would be sitting here talking to thin air. I'm so grateful that you tune in, watch in. I hope you subscribe, like, share, tell all your friends and family about it. I want to thank our sponsor. That's visitmyrtlebeach.com. We talked a little bit about Myrtle Beach on this episode. I think that you should go check it out. Visit myrtlebeach.com. If you happen to have an autistic child or traveler or a sensory sensitive traveler, you can also learn more about traveling to Myrtle Beach on the TV show Traveling the Spectrum on Peacock. And they also can help you plan that type of vacation with autistic or sensory sensitive on visitmyrtlebeach.com. Go tell everyone I said hi. I want to thank Nelco Media. I want to thank Nelco Comics, the active comic book shop where we record in. And once again, thank you for being a part of Relatively Famous. Oh, and if you happen to be related or know someone related to someone famous, reach out to me at podcastrelativelyfamous@gmail.com. Always looking for guests. Podcastrelativelyfamous@gmail.com.
You've been listening to Relatively Famous with Chip White. Please like and subscribe to Relatively Famous with Chip White.